Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio e buonasera. Benvenuti a questo evento speciale del Festival Visioni Urbane Beyond the Ideal City. Come sapete, nell'arco del festival, che si svolge dall'11 al 14 di novembre, abbiamo una serie di eventi speciali online sulla nostra pagina visioniurbane.stream e anche in presenza presso il nostro Museo Spazio Pubblico a Bologna. Trovate tutta la descrizione degli eventi nella sezione eventi speciali su visioniurbane.stream all'interno del programma. Siamo lieti di avere oggi con noi un artista che è anche stato parte della giuria di selezione del concorso Visioni Urbane nella categoria Resilient Communities. Stiamo parlando di Zoran Poposki, che è un artista accreditato e molto noto in ambito internazionale, di base ad Hong Kong. Questa intervista sarà in inglese e quindi adesso inizierò l'intervista in inglese. Good morning, good afternoon and good evening. Welcome to this special event of the Film Festival Urban Visions Beyond the Ideal City. I'm very glad today to have with us Zoran Poposki, an artist, acclaimed and well-known international artist based in Hong Kong. He served as a jury member for the category A Place, Resilient Communities, and Zoran is also a member of the advisory board of City Space Architecture. Good morning, good afternoon, Zoran, and welcome.
Good afternoon, Luisa. Thank you again for the kind invitation to take part in the festival's events. I really enjoyed being part of the jury and also overall enjoy collaborating with the organization as a senior advisor. So I am wearing a face mask, as you can see, because those are still required here in Hong Kong whenever you are in public spaces. And this interview is, with Luisa's permission, is taking place in a public space here in Hong Kong. So what you will hear and see is probably people passing by.
Yes.
And a lot of traffic in the background. This is probably the most quiet street that I can find around so that we can hear each other. In the background, there's a massive heritage development project that was completed recently, the PMQ, which used to be married quarters for the police officers. And now it's a major cultural district in the city. Which is now a hub for local designers and artisans, and it's one of the highlights of recent projects here in Hong Kong, which is very much about construction, redevelopment, and opening up new public spaces as well. Just the other day, I was at the opening of M+, which is the new visual culture museum, one of the world-class museums here in Hong Kong. Took 10 years to complete with a budget of more than $1 billion, but it's now home to one of the biggest collections of Chinese contemporary art in the world, and it hosts a major collection of Asian art, not only visual art in terms of painting and sculpture, but also design, architecture as well. So it's a major hub for architectural research in the region, potentially, as well as visual culture of all sorts, such as film, etc. So a lot of exciting new developments happening here. So this is kind of the context that I work in.
Yeah, well, that's amazing.
Introduction.
You are embedded in an urban vision.
Exactly, yeah. I am an artist. I've had more than 100 exhibitions and screenings of my work internationally and award-winning projects over the past 20 years. I'm also a curator. I've curated exhibitions and festivals here in Hong Kong as well as internationally. And I'm an academic. based at the Education University in Hong Kong, where I have created 7 years back the first community arts master's program in Asia, with a focus on art as a social practice. And one of the core subjects that we had in that program was actually art in public space and engaging with communities through the medium of art. So the whole premise of art as social practice is that art is not simply about creating an aesthetic object, but it's very much about creating contacts between different communities and between individuals around social issues. So that informs my pedagogical practice as well as my research practice, which for quite a long time has been surrounded around issues of public space in post-socialist context in particular. Now, as an artist, I quite often refer to the urban scape and the cityscape. One of my most successful projects has been a visual translation, a transcoding into semiotic translation of work, a novel by a postmodern Hong Kong author, Deng Kai-chung, called Atlas, Archaeology of an Imaginary City. And it's a book that is very much in the vein of books like Italo Calvino's Imaginary Cities and Jorge Luis Borges, his idea about a map and cartography and the cities that disappear. So the whole premise behind the artistic intervention was to do a psychogeography of all of the locations that I mentioned in the book, because the book is very much a palimpsest of historical records, archival records, as well as legends and myths and contemporary history and contemporary retellings of the topography of Hong Kong laid out on various locations throughout the city. So I revisited these locations, did psychogeography, and then documented that through a series of analog and digital works. And the project has been exhibited widely, from New York to Barcelona to a number of other places. And I'm now working on my mid-career retrospective at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Skopje, which is going to take place in about 2 years' time. And pretty much most of the, probably the crux of the research, artistic research presented there will be around issues of public space, in particular in the context of that post-socialist countries going through a transition of market disappearance of public space. So, those are the kind of issues that my artistic and curatorial and pedagogical practice revolves
it's
around.
amazing the work that you are doing from an art perspective, since with this festival, we are trying to engage artists and curators to define their perspective and to join our idea of creating an imaginary world based on urban visions. And it is mostly about, as you mentioned, public space, community, engagement, placemaking, participation. So I think that we are somehow aligned in a way, but through different projects.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was very good when you accepted. I was very glad when you accepted the invitation to join the festival as a juror, since I thought that you could give a significant contribution to the evaluation of the overall quality of the festival and also in the selection process of the awards. So
yeah,
I hope
thanks. It was a real pleasure, I have to say.
Yes, you were working on the main category, urban visions. Right. That was the most populated in terms of films, because this year we selected 42 films in the main category. Then we have different topics in this category that are addressing different perspectives, like contemporary urban challenges, portraits of cities, living the urban, transforming the urban art as an agent of change. So also those that are watching these films can actually understand how we are framing these productions into the overall idea of urban visions.
Right.
So just let us know about your opinion and how did you enjoy watching the films, your comments, feedbacks, whatever you think would be interesting for the audience.
Yeah, thanks again. As I said, I really enjoyed looking at the films. By far the biggest category. It was a very short time, but then again, you know, here in Hong Kong, we're pretty much landlocked because we have the longest quarantine period in the whole world, 21 days. So you can't leave unless you absolutely have to. So this was a way of me to travel a bit, if only in terms of imagining and visiting virtually some other locations on the planet. I was quite struck by the quality, the overall quality of the films. There were some serious filmmakers who contributed their work there. I was also struck by the variety of different approaches. So we had some pretty straightforward documentaries present, but we also had more poetic interpretations, more artistic interpretations, somatic interpretations through dance and performative actions in the city, virtual and using virtual reality, using technology quite a lot to extend, you know, how we perceive notions of public space and belonging and inhabiting or populating a certain location. So it wasn't an easy task actually to come up with winners. I would like to share with you a short list of some of my favorite films. Again, this is my personal choice. There are other members of the jury, so this is not the final decision.
Yes.
So just to highlight that. But I'm sharing this in the hope of, first of all, you know, congratulating the filmmakers on their work and highlighting some of the creative practices that I saw at work here. And second, I think it's also a learning, a festival is always a learning environment as well, right? As filmmakers, we learn from each other, and you know, we can only share and network virtually now in this particular context, but it's very much like an open classroom, right? Where there's a lot of peer learning and peer teaching going on. So this, I hope, contributes to that particular end, pedagogical end. So one of the films that I really liked was Street Traders on the Move, speaking about the issue of street vendors in Johannesburg losing their workplaces as well as their livelihood on account of COVID restrictions, and how the leaders of the street vendors take charge in a grassroots movement to seek sustainable solutions, negotiating with government. And this was very much, you know, a proper documentary, fly on the wall approach, following these leaders as they negotiate with different levels of power in terms of trying to come up with some sort of a activist-based solution for their issues. Another work that caught my eye was Searching for the Perfect Gentleman, a visual psychogeography done via Google Street View. So a really interesting project that was completely done in Google Earth and Google Street View, and I really liked hopping from one location onto another, and the amount of the sheer amount of research that goes into trying to locate individual agents, right, within a particular location, and how in a globalized world everything is interconnected. So it starts with the south of France, and then it goes to Africa, and then it goes to China, and we suddenly realize that there's this vast network of relations and of images that circulates, right? Because it's basically about this particular strong image that captures the director's attention. On the more poetic side, I would like to highlight Between These Bones. So this was a poetic exploration of Singapore, seen as a body, or specifically a mother's body. And I really enjoyed, the poetry that was written specifically for this particular film. Scary Places and Shapes and Sizes was another film that caught my attention. An erasure poem based on psychogeography, and with some really good editing that was clearly visible, and excellent cinematography, all in the function of writing a poem about American car culture and how that is transforming the way the cityscape is and evolves over time. Another work would be Spectrum APR. This is an Italian
Yes.
affair, right? About Adriano Padova Risoli, the region. And what struck me was this polyphonic symphony that emerged out of the all of these different, like a deluge of shots, random shots around the city, but ultimately coming together to create this symphony, this polyphony of different aspects of the whole region. Downriver, for me, was a really powerful somatic exploration of the city and of the flow of the humans, right, throughout the city, and negotiating one space either with the flow or then against the flow of that current of people. I can really relate to that, being surrounded by people most of the time, because Hong Kong is by far one of the densest cities on the planet. And in particular, there's a region, Mong Kok, which is the densest populated
Yes, yes. I've been
part
in
on the planet.
Mongkok.
You have been here,
I know
yes,
the
of course. So
experience.
you know it, you felt it.
Yes.
And finally, I would like to end with two that were my personal favorites. Again, this is my personal choice. It's not the definitive decision of the whole jury. Next Sunday by Marta Bogdanska. This was a beautifully shot and edited documentary that follows a group of young people in Lebanon, which are repurposing and reclaiming an abandoned masterpiece of a jewel of modernist architecture, designed by Oscar Niemeyer in the 1960s, which was, completed for its bad fortune at the very beginning of the Lebanese civil war, and it was never used and never opened. So it was really, in terms of connections with theory, in terms of connections with the right to the city and the now disputed legacy of high modernism, both its democratic potential, but also this exclusionary quality that it's always been part of its nature. I think the film was able to capture that beautifully. And finally, Starting Points by Flora Hoffman. This is a very, I would say, a humanistic, very tender group portrait of residents in the second public housing community in Taichung in Taiwan. And for me, what struck me the most in this piece of visual ethnography was the sheer persistence of the director, having spent 4 months embedded in that community, living actively alongside its residents, becoming one with that particular location, and then going beyond just a social issue, because this is a disputed social issue in contemporary Taiwanese society. Again, this is just the second public housing complex. Here in Hong Kong, we have many. So it's very much part of Hong Kong culture to provide social housing for the working class. But there, it's still a new issue, and it's a controversial issue in terms of public discourse around it. For me, what was really effective was the focus on individuals and their reasons why they are entering into this living arrangement, and the many interesting, human stories that emerge out of this. So again, for me, a very interesting and high quality selection of movies that covered all sorts of issues at the intersection of architecture, public space, placemaking, community, and globalization, as well as, COVID and all of these
Yes,
things
yes.
that we have been dealing with as of lately. And it was a pleasure to learn from the other cinematographers, as well as, again, a pleasure to contribute to highlighting the work of the best authors in this particular festival.
Well, thank you, because you provided such a rich overview across, all films through your selection. So I'm glad that you actually saw all these contents in the films, because the main scope of the festival is to actually discuss about urban complexity with the focus on public space, but also investigate social connections, human geography, and how people actually live in cities, in public spaces. It is not just about portraying the good side of the urban living, but to also address, conflicts and major threats. And we had also in past editions of the Urban Visions Festival these kind of films. Also, we have another category on migrants, refugees, and displaced communities that is very much related to, right to the city, citizenship, exclusion, and all these concepts that are part of the urban discussion, but that we would like to bring up front, also to understand difficulties for vulnerable groups to be part of the urban community. And this year also I would like to mention that we had another category, resilient communities, since City Space Architecture, that is promoting this film festival, has been invited to contribute to the Italian pavilion at the 17th Architecture International Exhibition, Venice Biennale.
Yes.
And so the main theme of the Italian pavilion is resilient communities. So we had these specific categories, resilient communities, connected to the contents that we were developing also for the Italian pavilion. So it's nice that from our side we work on architecture and urban design mostly. We were able to find so many links also to art and creative productions. And so I'm so happy to hear that from your perspective, all these different goals, very challenging, very ambitious, that we are trying to reach, are very, very well received. Because, I mean, it is about translating the contents, work on transdisciplinary innovation. That is always very difficult, as you know, and trying to set up a platform of contents that could be available at many different levels and for a very large audience. So
Right.
it's not just about experts. It is about people. It is about everyone, because this is about everyday life of people in cities. So I hope this was clear. I mean, in the selection.
Yes, it was very much so. Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad that we were able to collaborate on this matter, which is one of the most important and pressing issues. And as I see it moving forward, the whole idea of sustainability is going to be even more part and parcel of all of these discourses around cities and public space and placemaking
Yes.
and urban communities. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we are done with this interview, unless you want to say something else before we close.
No, just to say, to wish you all the best with the festival. I am quite aware how difficult it is to organize such a thing, especially nowadays when we have to rely so much on online dissemination of our work, and we lack most of the human interaction that goes on, behind these real events. So everything is becoming virtual.
Yeah.
I do hope that, on the other hand, this will create some sort of a new hybrid format when we are creating cultural content, right? that allows us to tap into a potentially much larger audience that goes well beyond our locality, and an audience that may not necessarily be familiar with the kind of issues that we are researching or creating about. That the use of technologies is going to prove democratic in that respect, that it will allow greater participation of various communities around the globe around these issues, and producing content likewise around these issues.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zoran, for joining today and for your work. So we will have some other activities, hopefully, right after the end of the festival, since the next edition will be in 1 year. And so across this year, we will try to arrange some other activities and events with filmmakers, artists, curators. So I hope you will join again our festival.
Yeah, sure. I would love to. Grazie, Elisa. Bye.
Thank you, and enjoy Hong Kong.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Bye. Bene, allora vi saluto e vi auguro buone visioni urbane. Vi ricordo che lo streaming è disponibile gratuitamente fino alla mezzanotte di domenica 14 novembre. Please follow our festival. The free streaming is available until midnight, Sunday, November 14th. So enjoy our urban visions. Thank you.